Backyard Farmer is a co-production of NET Television and Nebraska Extension.
Tonight on Backyard Farmer, we'll be picking out bug-free trees and see some colorful alternatives to impatiens. That's all coming up next, right here on Backyard Farmer. Hello again and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd and I'll be your host for the next hour of answering your gardening questions. And helping me answer those questions, we have our expert panel from Nebraska Extension. We have Jim Kalish answering all of our insect questions.
Good evening and Feliz Cinco de Mayo.
Oh boy. We have in the turf chair, critter creature, Dennis Ferraro, so don't call us with turf questions.
Nope, I don't have any grass in this chair, just all animals.
We have Kevin Corris answering the rots and spots questions.
Hello, hello.
And Sarah Browning answering all of our horticulture questions.
Good evening, everyone.
You know, you can get your questions answered by dialing 402-472-1212 if you live in Lincoln. Our toll-free number is 1-800-676-5446. Our email address, byf@unl.edu, and those questions and attached pictures will be answered on a future show. So when you do send us an email, please tell us as much information as you can, including at least which part of the state you live in. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow our tweets on Twitter, and look at our video features on YouTube. Before we get to your questions, let's take a look at some samples, and this is in the news.
Yes, it has been for some time. I'd like to show you what an emerald ash borer looks like again. We always need to have reinforcement and repetition to learn, and so this is an example of emerald ash borer on ash, and of course the ash borer beetle is dead. None are allowed in Nebraska. All right, and so you notice that it's very bullet-shaped and narrow-bodied. And then the hole that is highlighted in red on the image or that you see on the screen is the exit hole. And so it's kind of a D-shaped hole or emergence hole where the adult comes out of, you know. So that's one telltale sign of emerald ash borer is these D-shaped holes in probably a poor-looking ash tree. Mm-hmm. All right, so we do not have emerald ash borer in Nebraska as far as we know. It's possible that it is here, but it hasn't been discovered, and there's a lot of traps out across the state to detect it. And so it's an important thing to remember that you do not need to treat your prized tree until we get information that it is in the state and where it is located. And even if you're about 15 miles away or more from that site, you really don't have to be concerned about treating, because most of that treatment will simply just go to waste. So remember that, and I wanted to show you a little bit of the damage. So if you have an ash tree, though, I mean, you can be diligent out there in the landscape and look, but if you have an ash tree that's not looking very good, and if it doesn't happen to be a consequence of the recent drought we've had or something like that, or the stresses on the tree, and you see the D-shaped holes, and you also see the tunneling of the larvae. They're packed with frass. That's the powdery excrement of the larvae as they mine back and forth in wavy fashion, feeding on that essential layer between the bark and the heartwood. So if you see that in conjunction with the D-shaped holes, and especially if you see the shiny bullet-shaped half-inch long emerald ash borer beetle, be sure to contact your local extension office, the Nebraska Forest Service, the Nebraska Department of Agriculture, and we would follow up on that.
Thanks, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Do not spray. Okay, Dennis.
Okay, what we have here is, these are from the top of a tree, and they're found all over the backyard of one of our favorite horticulturists, landscape horticulturist. And this is done from squirrels, probably a young squirrel. Tree squirrels in Nebraska, our fox squirrels, have two litters primarily, one at the end of February and one in the 1st of July. So those ones that were born from the litter in February are just old enough to be on their own, and they're going out and they're chipping the tops of trees down, just for fun. Because they don't need nests right now, but they're learning how to build nests, and then they'll try to bring these up in a tree and put them up there. And you can see they're almost at a 45. These are a little more ragged than they should be for a squirrel. This is more typical. But when they're young, their teeth are small that's what they do. Actually, the best way is to box trap the culprit and remove it. There are no toxicants that can be used on squirrels in this, at all. Outside the city limits, if you have a game license, you can harvest the squirrel causing the problem. That's only outside any city limits with that game license. But otherwise, box trapping them and removing them is the way to go.
Thank you, Dennis. Kevin.
Today I have an abiotic disease sample. So this is a disease caused by a non-living agent, and this is herbicide drift. And there are many different plants that are susceptible to herbicide drift, especially the growth regulator type herbicides. And that's what I suspect we're dealing with here. And the symptoms on hosta, this is a hosta in front of me, include these really cupped and wrinkled leaves. Let me get this one out of the way so you can see that guy a little better. Hey, thanks, Sarah. So we can see that these guys here, these two are really cupped and wrinkled, and then we have some other healthy leaves, some of the newer leaves. So what happened is this plant had put out a certain amount of leaves, the drift incident happened, and then we got this damage, and now all the leaves that are coming out after the damage are actually fine because they didn't have any contact with that particular chemical drift. So that's what it kind of looks like in hosta. I also have a red bud here. The symptoms on this guy are quite a bit more difficult to distinguish. This red bud is just newly emerging. These leaves are just coming out. And we can compare maybe this green leaf here to this leaf here that I'm pointing to, and the difference is that the tip of this leaf basically stops developing, and that's the symptom of herbicide damage. The tip stops to develop, and you get leaf cupping, usually cupping upward, but it can also cup downward as well. And then the veins just look abnormal. They become really netted, and the leaf becomes almost kind of clear looking. So it's kind of a unique symptom, not great on this particular guy here, but as those leaves develop throughout the summer and we get more of this chemical in the air, those symptoms will become exacerbated. So unfortunately, we can't really do anything about this. If you are applying the herbicides yourself, you want to make sure that you're applying them according to the labeled rates, and you're applying when there is very, very low wind speed. So usually in the morning is a good idea. And that'll help keep these drift incidents at a minimum.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Okay, Sarah, spread that pollen.
All right. I wanted to say just a couple of things about pines. And this is actually a Mugo pine. And what I wanted to show you here is the new growth that's coming on. And this is what we would call the candle stage because, you know, these elongated shoots, you know, somewhat resemble candles. For a shrub like this, if you have a Mugo pine in your landscape, we find that they often get too big for the site where they were originally planted. This is the stage of growth where you can do some shaping and some management of the eventual size of that plant. What you would do is you would take this candle and you could cut it about in half. You could take about 50% of that candle growth off, and that will minimize how much new growth the plant puts on in a year, and it'll make the plant more dense. So you can't ever really cut pine branches back drastically, but you can do some management of size by just trimming the candles a little bit each year. So that's something that you would want to do now if you have a plant that you want to keep to a certain size. So just cut those candles. So one other thing I wanted to mention real quickly is we can also see on this sample, if you look here, we have the male pollen structures, which are releasing pollen right now. I don't know if you can see the little cloud of pollen coming up. These are normal structures. We occasionally get questions from people who think they're a worm or some kind of insect attacking the plant. And no, that's just a natural part of the pine structure.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. All right. So you have the first picture question. This is a viewer who lives west of Grand Island. And she has a branch tip pruned from the top of a 30-foot bur oak, 14-inch diameter. The odd-looking growth was on the top, and it looks like sort of this leafy gall-like thing.
Exactly, Kim.
Perfect name for it, right?
You're a master entomologist.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That is actually a gall formed by tiny little cynipid wasps. And oaks, like bur oaks and swamp and white oaks, tend to have a lot of different kinds of galls, which are very interesting. There can be over 100. And this one happens to be called leafy oak gall. because it's leafy.
Leafy.
Pretty. And so actually it's not causing any harm or anything. There's several cells at the center of that growth, that shortened growth, and they will, little gall wasps will eventually come out of there. So, not really, more of a curiosity. And actually, for native trees like the bur oaks or whatever, they just have that long kind of a companionship with the gall wasps, and it's worked out pretty well for eons.
All
So
right.
nothing to do with it, Bob.
Thanks, Jim. All right, Dennis, this is a viewer who has sent us a series of pictures of holes of critters.
Okay.
And she is wondering what made what and how to get rid of all of them. So that's number one.
Okay, number one is pocket gophers.
Okay, and then I believe we have a kind of a hole at the end of a tree.
The end of a tree.
Yeah, at the underside of a tree.
It's hard, I only scale there, but it looks like it could be a vole.
Okay.
Bull
Yep.
and there's a dead vole.
Yep. Yeah.
There's your clue.
So she's really wondering how does she get rid of the pocket gophers and then the
Okay, the
vole?
pocket gophers being in the field, there's an actual bait for pocket gophers, especially if that's an alfalfa field or a pasture, and it can be put in a hopper and used on a 3-point hitch. It's called a burrow builder, and it drops a poison into the burrows as it goes across if you want to use a toxicant. There are also traps called Maccabee traps that could be placed down in the burrows for the pocket gopher. The vole, I always go with the multi-catch traps, the ones you wind up, the box type that you find at larger co-ops and stores that sell a lot of farm equipment. And you wind that up, put a little bird seed or grass seed around the entrance, and the voles primarily will follow each other, and you may get 4 or 5 a night. Voles are very cyclic, so keep at it, and you usually reduce their numbers.
So in her situation, she's just going to have to be really, really diligent.
Right, exactly.
Okay. All right, thank you, Dennis. Okay, Kevin, fresh spinach is appearing at market, which is awesome. But we have actually 2 viewers who sent us pictures of white spots appearing on spinach leaves. This is actually one that overwintered in a cold frame and had a 3rd picking. Didn't know if this is frost damage or not. And then the second viewer who kind of sent something similar, that was actually outside. So you can kind of see those whitish spots.
Okay, and it's really crinkled, right? Are we seeing
Which
that?
would be kind of the Savoy leaves on spinach, which that will do.
Oh, okay, so that's
yeah, it's
normal.
a variety. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just the white spots. It's really difficult to say. There are a couple of different, there's a fungal and a bacterial pathogen that will cause those kind of spots on spinach. It would be very difficult to identify with just the photo. So if you would like to send a sample, that would be great. Please do so to the Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic. I don't think it looks like frost damage. If frost damage on a succulent like that would appear as kind of a darkish brown to almost black coloration, and it wouldn't be in spots. You would see most of the leaf or one half of the leaf or something die back. So it's hard to say. Send a sample. Hopefully it wasn't some kind of fertilizer burn or chemical burn too. That can also create little white or tannish brown spots like that as well.
Should they eat it,
Sarah?
That's a hard one. No.
Would it be powdery mildew, Kevin, do you think? Or
Creating a spot?
a white patch on the leaf? Don't think so?
I don't think it looked enough like
No,
that
it looked
to-
more like a
Okay.
clearing out of the tissue
Oh,
rather
okay.
than a
Could
fuzzy,
be.
All right.
Could
fuzzy
be
spot.
thrips
So,
too.
Yeah.
Thrips?
I mean, it could be thrips.
Okay.
That-
long story short, I guess it could be a myriad of things. So
Yeah.
send a sample if you
Myriad.
could.
Probably not eat it until
said the
you know
word
for
wrong.
sure what's
Yeah,
going on.
good.
Right, just in case
like
it's
that.
fertilizer.
How do
Yeah.
thrips taste?
How do thrips taste? Just like the spinach they eat?
Okay, Sarah, you get, we actually had three questions about boxwood as well. This one happens to be west of Kearney. These came with the house. They did prune them mid-March, and this winter, brown spots, and
Yeah.
you just happened to go collecting. So they want to know what happened here, and as do the other viewers.
Right. Yeah, this is winter desiccation on boxwood, and it's very common this spring. Plants lose too much water, they lose water too quickly, and they can't replace it, and so you get this dieback that occurs at the tips of the branches where the leaves just turn this kind of tannish color. So when it's not too severe, what you can do is you can just go in and prune the dead sections out back to where you have living tissue. In one of the pictures, Kim, I know the viewer, there was a fairly large spot in the boxwood that was pretty brown. And you really don't have any other course other than just to go ahead and prune it out. That's really all you can do. For the fall, though, this fall, make sure your plants are really well watered going into the winter. So through September, October, November, those dry periods, make sure you really water the plants well. Make sure they have a good layer of mulch so that that's holding the moisture in the soil. And then you might even think about an anti-desiccant or an anti-transpirant application on your plants during the winter if you're having a lot of trouble with this.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Well, a few weeks ago, Lauren gave us some tips about picking out trees that would be resistant to diseases. Those rots and spots aren't the only thing interested in damaging your trees. Right now, Tom Weisling will tell us what to look for in new trees to avoid having them eaten alive by bugs.
One of the best ways to keep insects out of your yard is to not bring them into the yard in the first place. This is kind of preventative. So when you're going out and selecting your plants, try to find plants that are pest-free or appear to be in the best possible condition. Now, one thing you want to do is make sure that you select plants that are well adapted for the area. Especially trees, when they're stressed, they become really susceptible to various pest insects, especially those that like to bore into the stems and even to the trunks. So select plants that are well adapted. Now when I come out and I'm looking for my own trees, what I'm looking for is signs and symptoms of the insect. So the symptoms are the way the plant looks, things that don't look right, and then the signs are either the actual insect itself or indications that the insect was what's present. So the first thing you want to start with is the foliage. And what you're looking for in the foliage, if it's present, it may be early in the year when you're looking, but the leaves are out, look for malformations on the leaves and look for little speckles on the leaves. Now where you're going to find the pests is typically on the underside. So if you see anything on the upper side that looks just a little bit off, flip the leaf over and look for an insect. And there you might find aphids, you might find scale insects, there's a variety of things you might find. The next step is to look at all the little branches, and what you're looking for here, the symptoms would be little holes in the limbs or maybe sap flowing out of the limbs or little breakage points, and in those spots you might actually find some little insects. So you want to look very carefully. Scale insects tend to like to get on branches as well, and sometimes mealy bugs and other insects with piercing sucking mouthparts. And also you can get borers in these areas, just little insects that bore right into the wood and create a little cavity, and then a little larvae go in there. The next step is the trunk. And in the trunk, same sort of thing with the branches. You're looking for holes, sap that might be flowing out, various things like that, gouges in it that might be caused by insects. And then lastly, right down at the soil trunk interface, pull away a little bit of the soil or bedding material and look for signs of insects there. And what you would find is bulges in this part of the plant. You might find holes in there, sap flowing out, or maybe they're frass, they're excrement being pushed out of the hole. And once you take the tree and plant it, put it in your yard, continue that cycle of inspection, because that's really important to prevent the problem from happening in the first place. Catch it early. The things you might want to watch for are maybe if you have like a fruit tree, peach tree, watch out for peach tree borers, maybe a trunk wrap down here at the soil trunk interface that would prevent the insect from getting access to it. But keep up with the tree, inspect it often. You're going to have a great pest-free tree for many years to come.
The best way to get a tree off to the right start is by not bringing home a problem with in the first place. So just a quick check around the leaves, trunks, and roots will help you pick the best tree, help you avoid those problems later. And you know, I think people look first at the beautiful flowers or the canopy, and they don't really take a peek at whether a hitchhiker is coming home with them. So good advice from Tom. All right, this is a viewer who sent us pictures of white pines, Jim. And they have all this white stuff on the trunk. And we may have a close-up as well of what all this white stuff is, and they wonder... That's
fantastic. It's not good, but it's fantastic. That's
what
probably
is
one
it?
of the worst infestations of white pine adelgid I have ever seen. So,
Great.
Adelgids, white pine adelgids, they're like aphids, and they're really closely related to aphids. So they have their mouth parts penetrating the bark, and they're feeding on that layer of moisture and nutrient below the bark. And so it's not good to have them because they're going to reduce the vitality of the tree, especially in those numbers like that. So fortunately, you know, they're pretty easy to dislodge. And so I'd say, if this is one case of the tree like that, get a strong nozzle on a sprayer with a hose end type sprayer with a canister, and put some insecticidal soap in there. And along with that, which will kind of break what we call that fluffy stuff they secrete, sometimes it's very repellent. So just a little bit of soap will help too, and just have fun and spraying them all the way around, you know, the tree to dislodge them. And I'm sure that's probably going to wipe out 90-some% of them. And then just keep an eye on them year after year, and just keep up the same practice. And so that's good. Just following Tom's advice, you know. Don't let it get that far. Go out and inspect your trees on a regular basis, and things won't get that bad.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. All right, Dennis, this is a Donovan viewer who has sent us a series of pictures of a critter that is digging around their foundation. Comes about this time of year, causes digging and uprooting of small plants, moving river rock. 8 holes in one night around the foundation, 6 to 10 inches in diameter. He wants to know what it is and how to get rid of it. And they tried a live trap last year, and they've tried a trail cam, but he apparently is camera shy.
Well, in that area, the Grand Island to the North Platte area, we're starting to see more and more populations of woodchucks or groundhogs. And it looks like it's one looking for a place for a home. And they'll dig down 20 foot if they can. And so it's trying several places around the foundation to dig. If you have a garden, they love things like zucchini, corn, and other cupids. So what you can do, if you're going to trap it in a box, like a cage trap, the best thing to do is cover it with burlap or a sheet. Do not let it be able to see in through the sides. And then wire it open. Put a cucumber or a piece of sweet corn in there and let it steal it for a week, and then unwire the baling wire, and you'll probably catch it. And then you can have it removed. You can call the Humane Society of the area, and however way you want to have it removed. There are no toxins, there are no repellents, and you can't use a leg hold in that area within town. So I would go with the live box trap, and just be patient and put that trap down, let it take the food for almost a week, have it covered, and then unwire it and let it be caught.
All right, thank you, Dennis. This is a Central City viewer, Kevin, who has peaches and has noticed that they have this odd discoloration beginning, that orangish bubbly stuff. They're wondering what that is and what to do about it.
Yeah, that looks like a fungal disease called peach leaf curl. And it's a foliage disease, so it'll get on the leaves and do what you're seeing there. It can infect the fruits, but it's rare. So most of the times when we have a foliage fungal disease like this, we say you can get rid of it with good sanitation, removing those leaves in the fall and all that. Well, that doesn't work super well with this particular pathogen. And a lot of times, if you have infection bad enough, it'll warrant a fungicide treatment. And those are usually copper-based products that will give you some efficacy, and they need to be applied in the fall after the plant has gone dormant. So it's really kind of interesting, different kind of a biological cycle there with that particular fungus. So if you have it and it's really severe and it warrants a fungicide treatment, that'll need to happen with a copper-based product in the fall. You can still remove your leaves when they fall in the fall, and you might be able to remove some of those spores from the environment, but studies have shown that for some reason getting sanitation alone just doesn't quite do it with this particular fungal pathogen.
All right, and maybe we'll get that in our backyard farmer peach garden. So
be a
we
good
have one or
educational
two.
tool.
There we go. we won't do whatever we're supposed to. All right, Sarah, you have a viewer who has grasses or a grass, which looks like a turf grass, invading her creeping phlox. And it's a beautiful patch, and she's wondering how to get rid of the grass in there.
Well, there is a herbicide that will selectively remove grasses from plantings of broadleaf plants like the phlox. So it commonly is sold under the name Grass Be Gone, And you can overspray the phlox and it won't damage it as long as you follow, label directions and don't spray when the air temperature is way too hot or the plants are under drought stress. So I would just use the Grass Be Gone to try to get those plants out of there. Now, this could be an annual grass, or it could be, something like Kentucky bluegrass, a perennial that's coming in. The Grass Be Gone will work on both. But if you have problems with annual grasses like crabgrass and foxtail, then you could also use a pre-emergent to help you with controlling future weed problems. And so you could use regular preen or any other type of pre-emergent that's labeled for use on ornamental plantings. And we get the best results if you use a pre-emergent in combination with a nice layer of mulch. So if you put the preen down first, then put about 2 to 3 inches of mulch on top and water it in really well, and that'll give you some good protection for about 6 to 8 weeks. And then you'll probably have to make a second application later in the summer.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, for this week's Green and Growing tip, we check out some broadleaf evergreens and how you can help them stay green throughout the growing season. People have a fascination with broadleaf evergreens in Nebraska, and unfortunately they are not a plant that will perform well in very many situations. This is PJM rhododendron. Broadleaf evergreens, rather than having needles, have what look like real leaves, which means that you have all that surface that can transpire and lose moisture over the winter. They have to have a protected location. It's typically the desiccation of the wind and a dry winter without snow cover that is really going to cause problems for them. They don't do well in the west or southwest facing. And again, you have to be able to provide water during the winter if we are in a situation where it's dry. The rhododendrons, PJM, is one of the hardiest ones here. We also have Mahonia. That one tends to burn. It blooms very early in beautiful yellow. The third one is holly. And the blue boy, blue girl, blue prince, blue princess are probably the best. Again, you really have to watch conditions with these plants. Keep a sharp eye on those broadleaf evergreens, keep them protected, and perhaps if they aren't performing well season to season, you might be in one of those locations in the state where they're really not going to do very well. All right, Jim, we have a question for you. This is a viewer in Omaha who has a sedge. They dug it up out of northeast Nebraska, planted it. They want to know if there are insects that you're familiar with that would be depending on the sedge for food, because apparently they dug it up and now they want to kill it.
Oh, okay. Well, one thing I can think of are sometimes there are some webworms that might feed on sedge. Also, grasshoppers feed on sedges as well, but nothing that you can count on that with reliability that would do something like that.
All righty. This is a viewer, Dennis, who rescued a migrating bird and he needs help and wonders what should they do?
First of all, because there's a lot of laws with migratory birds and migratory bird acts, unless you're licensed to rescue a migratory bird, don't touch it. Call Game and Parks. You can call our ornithologist at the University of Nebraska School of Natural Resources, Dr. Mary Brown, at 402-472-2946. And she's our ornithologist that can tell you where to go. But the way it works, you have to have a migratory bird and a raptor rehabilitation license to touch the bird.
All right, thank you, Dennis. This is a Lincoln viewer, Kevin, who has cabbage, wants to know why 3 out of 6 would wilt for seemingly no reason. The roots looked pretty good, and so did the leaves, except down they went.
Ooh.
Picture.
Yeah, sending a picture would help, or even a sample of one that's wilted would be good. If they've been watered and it's not a drought issue and the roots look fine, man, I'm at a loss there. Sorry. A picture or a sample would be great to help with that.
All right, thanks, Kevin. So, Sarah, you get the Twitter question from last week.
Okay.
And the question was, a rose bush wasn't covered over the winter. They don't see any new green growth. They only see leaves from what was underground. What should they do? And our answer, I believe, was at Orvin Bontrager, trim back the rose bush's dead growth. Wait and see if it survives. It probably won't. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, you know, this was a hard winter for roses. We saw a tremendous amount of damage on all types of roses coming into the spring. So I agree with Orvin. All you can really do is just cut back the dead growth to the point where there's some green tissue, green stems, and hopefully it'll grow back. Hopefully also it wasn't a grafted rose. If it was an own root rose, there's a chance it'll grow back and still be pretty. If it was a grafted rose, there is a chance that you could have the whole top part could be dead and you'll be left with just the rootstock, which will not make a good rose. And in that case, you just need to dig it out and get rid of it.
Excellent. It's Mother's Day. Buy a new one. We're still waiting for the weather to warm up to get things into the ground at our garden. Before we go to break, Terry James gives us an update out at the Backyard Farmer Garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we're actually going to be making that strawberry rhubarb pie. Our rhubarb is looking really good right now. However, it is actually going to seed. So you see those flower heads on that rhubarb. You can just go ahead and cut those off and that rhubarb will be fine. Remember to cut the leaves off, only eat the stalk, and leave the entire plant. Don't take the entire plant away so that it can rejuvenate for the next year. Our hoop house is looking really well. We got some great cool season crops growing in there, just about ready to get picked. So we're pretty anxious about having a little early season produce in our garden. We are holding off though on some of that planting. As you can see in the weather, it's not really warming up a lot right now. So we're actually gonna hold off on those warm season crops for a couple more weeks. Probably looking at after Mother's Day, closer to Memorial Day for those warm season crops like tomatoes and peppers. We're really starting to grow in the Backyard Farmer Garden. We'll see you next week.
It's time for a short break. Coming up on our show, we'll have Gladys's Plant of the Week and the Lightning Round. Stay tuned for more Backyard Farmer right after these messages. Welcome back to Backyard Farmer. We've got more of your questions to answer, and later on in the show, we'll be taking a look at substitutions for impatiens. You can still phone in your questions by dialing 1-800-676-5446. While you're doing that, we'll start the lightning round. Are you ready, Sarah?
I'm ready.
We have a viewer who wants to know how to get rid of orange daylilies.
Dig them up. Or use Roundup. That's really all you can do.
All right. This viewer heard you could use Epsom salts for tomatoes and cucumbers, etc., and she put the Epsom salts in the hole and then planted the plants and they died.
You know, there really isn't any good purpose for Epsom salts. Magnesium sulfate is what Epsom salts are. We have plenty of magnesium in a soil. Sulfur could possibly do a little bit to lower soil pH, but not necessary.
All right. A couple of viewers have sent in questions about their hardy hibiscus and their blue mist spirea are not budding yet.
Yeah, my hardy hibiscus haven't come up yet either, so I'm not sure if they have winter killed or if they're just really, really slow.
All right.
Give it more time.
Okay. We have a viewer that has a 10-year-old Weigela not budding. This is an Omaha viewer.
Could be winter kill. We've seen a lot of unusual winter damage on shrubs this year.
All right. Is it okay to plant those warm season transplants in the garden this weekend?
It is if you're willing to give them some protection, because there is still potential for frost up until about the 10th of May, possibly even later. So be ready to protect them if we get a frost.
All right. Thank you,
for
Sarah.
6, Kevin.
All right. Kevin, you ready?
Absolutely.
So this viewer has the horrible European buckthorn all over their yard, and it is showing rust.
Okay.
What is the alternate host for that one?
Ooh, Kim, I don't know.
Okay. We have a viewer who said they had spots on their ornamental pear leaves last year, and they want to know, is there a way to prevent that from happening this year?
Yes, but you may have missed your window of opportunity. A lot of times to prevent that, you want to apply a fungicide, and it's a preventative, and you may have missed that opportunity. It's getting a little too late in the season already.
Okay, so the teleal horns have burst out on the cedar apple rust skulls, and the apples have flowered. Too late to do anything for the apple trees?
Well, no, I think you could still benefit from a fungicide application to the apple trees because this is when the spores are moving, landing on the trees, germinating, and causing infection. So.
All right. A viewer has choke cherries and loves the berries, but apparently has what appears to be powdery mildew on the leaves. Anything that can be done about that?
Since powdery mildew doesn't require standing water to cause infection, you can actually use a sprayer hose to physically remove the powdery mildew from the leaves.
Excellent. That was quick. All right. Are you ready, Dennis?
I'm ready.
We've had a couple of people ask us about where to get those scaredy eyes balloons that you mentioned last time you were on the show.
Any of the garden stores will have them.
All right. And they are good for what?
Woodpeckers and flickers.
Okay. We have a viewer who heard an ad on the radio for a spray animal repellent. Do those work?
Those are very non-effective. I would not waste your money.
All right.
Keep going, keep going.
Where do opossums live in the daylight?
They're actually in holes. They can be under a shed. They could be under a bunch of trees. They're very nomadic, and they'll be in any cavern they can hide in.
All right. We have a viewer who wants to go hiking in what is kind of western Nebraska rattlesnake country. They want to know if they should carry anti-venom.
You can't carry anti-venom. You can only get it at an emergency room because it has to be kept cold and it has to be given intravenously.
So if they get bit by a rattlesnake, what do they do?
Call 911. You got about 4 hours to get to the hospital. Do not panic. Slowly get to the hospital.
Good. All right. Do koi carry diseases?
Probably not too much, but they can get salmonellosis.
All right. Nice job. Are you ready?
I can't match Dennis tonight. I'm sorry. I'm defeated already. I'll try.
It's all in your mind. Okay. We have a viewer who wants to know how to control white flies with natural products when they're in the garden.
Probably just repeated applications of pyrethrins, a number of chemicals that end in THRAN, pyrethrins.
All right. There are shiny black and green, what appears to be beetles about ½ an inch long, crawling up the walls of this particular person's house. What are they?
Boy, that's a tough one. I'm thinking possibly flea beetles, but I'm not sure. It's about the time of year for flea beetles. I don't know if they aren't bothering anything, don't do anything about it.
All right. What about tiny red insects the size of a period at the end of a sentence? What would those be?
What font would that be?
Not one I can read.
I'm thinking that would be clover mites, and that's an episodic thing that happens every season, and the season is still underway.
All right. When do you treat for grubs in the lawn?
You treat probably about mid-June, and you have a window up to about mid-July for treatment. And you can use imidacloprid only if needed. All right, that's
nice job.
Okay.
All right.
Dennis still got it.
All right,
Yeah.
Sarah, what has Gladys shared with us today?
Well, she brought us this beautiful flower here in front is a tree peony. And tree peonies are actually related to the herbaceous peony that we're all familiar with, only they grow on a woody stem. They have, woody stems that overwinter like a regular woody plant does. And obviously they bloom a little bit earlier, but they have these beautiful flowers in all sorts of colors, white, orange, red, pink. They are a little bit taller than herbaceous peonies too. They usually get in about the 5 to 6 foot height range sometimes in that area. So very, very beautiful plants. And then the other plant that she brought for us, these little white flowers here in the back, this is chokeberry, which is in the genus Aronia. And you probably heard about Aronia, in the health industry, great health benefits, all the antioxidants and everything. After these little flowers fade, there'll be either a red or a black berry that will come on. And birds like to eat them, but they're really bitter and astringent tasting, so birds don't generally eat them until really late in the winter when there's nothing else left for them to choose from. And they're actually edible for humans too. I mean, you can pick them and eat them if you like, but they are pretty bitter.
Excellent. We want to say thanks to Gladys, as always, for sharing the largesse of her garden with us. All right, Jim, you get the next picture. We actually had two viewers ask this question. This one is in Ponca Hills. She says these come out by the hundreds and crawl around on her patio. She wants to get rid of them. They do have a cat in the area, so they don't want to do any damage to the cat.
Yeah, those are millipedes. Sometimes they're referred to as wireworms incorrectly, but millipedes, and they feed on organic matter, decaying plant material out in the landscape, in the turf or wooded areas. And they do have migrational periods, especially when we get heavy rain, periods of heavy rainfall, or even when it's really dry, they migrate. So when they encounter the home perimeter, you know, you can, a wise thing to do would be to use inorganic or, you know, mulches around the home anyway. That will tend to inhibit their movement into that area. Also, keep it rather dry if you can in that area. And then thirdly, if you apply something like bifenthrin as a preventive barrier around there, that will take care of some of them. But just remember, there's a lot of them moving in, so the insecticide is effective. It's just that there's so many coming in that it gives the perception that it's not doing any good. And of course, eventually, after just a few weeks, you know, it will dissipate and be gone.
All right, thank you, Jim. Dennis, you have a couple of snake questions.
Before we get to that, I'd like to say, when the lightning round, we talked about the rattlesnake, just for everybody's safety. Always take 5 steps away, and if you do accidentally get bit, do not use any of those suction devices, do not cut it. Just call 911 and get to a hospital as soon as you can. Time is tissue, but do not put ice on it. Do not do anything. Do not drink alcohol. It just makes it seem like you didn't get bit. Just call 911 and get to a hospital as soon as you can. Do not do any kind of those, don't use any of those devices. The new CrowFab makes it worse.
All right. And on that note, you have 2 pictures of snakes.
Oh, great.
One is, this viewer found this one in their basement.
Steraria decayii, the brown snake, eats slugs and actually has a small head, and it'll pull little land snails right out of their things. They only grow to about 10 to 12 inches. Very benign, don't carry any germs and viruses, can't cause any problems. Good to have around the garden, especially if you have slug and snail problems.
Excellent. And then this, I believe, the next one is from near Ceresco, and they like this one. They want more.
It's a garter snake. People don't realize we do have 4 types of garter snake species in the state of Nebraska. Anything with stripes going down its body, no matter what color they are, is one of those 4 types of garter snakes. Feeds on insects, minnows, and worms. Again, harmless.
Excellent. Kevin, we have a viewer on an acreage west of Lincoln, and they have, looks like an Austrian pine probably. Didn't look too healthy. They decided to wait and see. This year it has some of the brown needles greening up, which we know doesn't happen, but the top of the tree looks healthy. Is this one of those great pine diseases or winter desiccation?
Well, there are some clues that from that picture that make me think that this is indeed Dothostroma needle blight, which is a fungal needle blight. We could see that the tree was losing needles from the bottom to the top, and that's very indicative of a fungal needle blight type of a disease. They'll start at the bottom because the bottom of the tree is less exposed to the wind and the sunlight, and water remains on those needles for longer periods of time, and it's easier for fungi to infect those needles. So you'll see it start at the bottom, and then those fungi will produce spores. When it rains, the rain will splash those spores up onto the next layer, the next branch set, and so on and so forth. Plus, when we looked at each individual needle, it looked like the tips of the needles were brown and the base of the needle was green. So that's another indication of Dothostroma needle blight. I do think, though, however, on that particular sample, we have winter injury as well, because the one picture that showed the needles that were browning was this year's needles, and Dothostroma only attacks second-year needles. So I think it could be a combination of both. If you are thinking about applying a fungicide, you might want to think about sending in a sample first to get a positive diagnosis before you go and spend money on a fungicide.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. All right, Sarah, a viewer has two 2-year-old weeping cherry trees. This year one bloomed, the other didn't. They both died all the way to the ground. She's in Auburn. What do you think about those weeping cherries?
I've seen a fair number of them dead this spring, so it's a little problematic. I know the weeping form of a tree can be a nice focal point in a landscape, can be something fun to have, but sometimes they just don't survive very well. So
and not a thing she can do if
yeah,
it's done.
nothing you can do.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, downy mildew has caused some serious issues with gardeners planting impatiens around their homes. For our second feature tonight, Luann Finke shows us some alternatives.
Gardeners with shade, turn to impatiens to fill those shady areas with color all summer long. But did you notice last August and September, your impatiens beds looked as though the neighbor had forgotten to water while you were on vacation? If you did, there's a good chance it was downy mildew had attacked your impatiens. Now's the time for you to be aware of that problem and make plans for changes in your bedding plant solutions for the season so it doesn't happen again. There are many alternatives. Knowing what you are purchasing at the garden centers will make a big difference in seeing whether the problem is in your landscape this season. Garden center professionals who understand the impact of downy mildew on shade plantings can help you make good choices for your landscape. There's different kinds of impatiens. New Guinea impatiens, which is the species hockey eye, have resistance to downy mildew, so you're safe using that kind. It's the Walleriana or the classic dazzlers that have the problem with the downy impatiens. Here you can see 4 packs produced of New Guinea impatiens that can give you that same brilliant color with lots of options and be used as bedding plants. The other alternative is to look at some of the selections like Bounce or Sun Patience that are of that same genetic makeup that have great resistance and really vigorous growth. Additionally, you can consider plants like begonias. Here's one of my favorite, the Whopper Big Red Bronze. Does beautifully in shade as well as quite a bit of sun. And there are so many other alternatives within the lines of begonias that can provide beautiful color for your shade gardens. You know you're going to have shade and you want beautiful color in your gardens this year. So there's a lot of things to consider. Will downy mildew make its way to your garden this year, even though you didn't see it last year? Consider foliage as an option for your garden. Maybe it's one of my always favorite coleus. Perhaps it's polka dot plant, which can bring vibrant color to your landscape. The issue is consider your options, consider your risk, and you'll have lots of things to consider at the garden center this year.
As Luann said, there are some options that will help you avoid downy mildew on your impatiens, selecting a resistant variety, or trying something new and different this year. Your garden center professional should be able to help you make those selections, or of course your horticulturist in your county. All right, Jim, you get the last picture. This is a viewer who found this thing on a black hickory about 8 feet tall, and she's south of Blair. What is that?
That's a Carolina praying mantid egg case. A lot smaller than the Chinese one, not as frothy looking. That one actually looks kind of empty. It might be one from a year ago.
But pretty cool.
Keep it around.
Excellent. Dennis, it's snake night. So we have another picture from a viewer who found a snake, and she's kind of wondering what that one.
Didophis punctatus. That is the ringneck snake. Eats baby spiders. Doesn't grow more than about 16 to 20 inches long. Very slender, and they roll up their tail and show the bright orange color that resembles a ladybird beetle or a monarch butterfly to keep birds from eating them. And they let off a musk. Harmless, but love to eat baby spiders.
Excellent. I need one of those in my yard. Okay, Kevin, lilacs. These were transplants about 3 years ago. One in the middle died last year. The remaining 2 bloomed, but the leaves have rots and spots, yellow and brown spots. They want to know, what is it? How can they treat it? Should they expect the remaining 2 to die from this substance as well?
I think first off, the plants are a little bit stressed because of the condition they're in, the soil that they're in. It looks like a new construction soil. It looks really compact and clayey and hard. I'm not the soil or turf expert, but I think there's some things that could be done to improve soil drainage. They could maybe increase the mulch pile beneath that plant. The spots that I saw looked a lot like anthracnose, which is a genus of fungus that attacks a very large range of plants. It has a very large host range, lilacs included. And what you'll notice is that most of those brown spots were on the leaf edge or on the leaf vein, and that's very indicative of anthracnose. That particular fungus doesn't necessarily it won't warrant a fungicide application unless you have repeat infection year after year. But what you can do is when those leaves fall to the ground, you can manage this particular disease with sanitation. So you want to remove those leaves and destroy them if you can by burning them or burying them. And you should be able to get a hold of the disease that way. Again, if you do have repeat infection year after year, there are some preventative type fungicides that can be applied early spring to kind of protect those leaves as they're coming out so you won't see those spots.
All right, thank you, Kevin. All right, Sarah, Terry talked about the backyard farmer rhubarb. Here is the handful of, oh dear, my rhubarb is sending up these things. So what are you going to recommend here?
You know, rhubarb tends to bolt when we get cold night temperatures in the spring and the plants have already started to grow. So this is very, very common. The flower stalks themselves are not edible, they're just hollow. So what I usually do with my plant is I just go and I just pull those flower stalks out and throw them away. And the rest of the plant is still usable. You can still go ahead and eat the rest of the stalks the way that you normally would. They don't become poisonous or anything when the flower starts or the plant starts to bloom. So just pull those flower stalks off and go ahead and use the rhubarb as normal.
Excellent, thank you, Sarah. Well, we shoot a Twitter question out there. I guess you tweet them instead of shooting them. You can tell what I know about that. But our Twitter question of the week is 5-year-old pampas grass, so that's probably Ravenna grass, keeps getting smaller each year. This year there's no green at all. Should it be rogued out or should we wait? So viewers who would like to tweet us back at BYFUNL, give us your answer, and next week we will see if we can stump the chumps on the panel. We just might throw that to a turf grass guy, and we probably will stump them. We also have announcements tonight. I believe we have 3 of them. The first is the Sunset Hills Garden Club plant sale, which is this Saturday, 8 to 3, 120th and William in Omaha. We have a number and an email on the screen for more information on that one. We also have the West Potawatomi Master Gardeners plant sale, Saturday, May 9th, 8 to 11, Iowa School for the Deaf in Council Bluffs with a number on your screen. And I believe we have a third one, which is the Lincoln Ira Society's annual show, which is a week from Saturday, 1 to 4:30 at St. Andrew's Lutheran Church in Lincoln with a number on the screen. So lots of fun things going on in the gardening world. All right, we have just a few minutes left. So Jim, we're going to throw a question to you to begin with, which is, are there more than one kind of borer that get into ash? This is a Hastings viewer.
Yes, there are. You know, there's you can have flat-headed apple tree borer, which is a very flat, metallic-looking beetle, bronzy. You can get lilac ash borer, which is actually out right now, and you can get carpenter worms. There's a number of them. So. The beetle borers, like the banded ash borer and the red-headed ash borer. So there's a lot of them, but a lot of those will attack the trees only when they're pretty stressed out. And so if you usually have a healthy tree, you have minimal problems with those kinds of borers, maybe with the exception of the lilac/ash borer.
All right, thank you, Jim. Dennis, we actually had a picture of a former armadillo on Facebook last week, and this viewer wants to know what is the current status of armadillos in Nebraska.
They are moving. One has been found as far north as Norfolk, and I believe Game and Park said there was 8 to 9 found along Interstate 80 last year. So we haven't found any, I haven't heard any reports yet this year. It's not quite warm enough yet. So with whether it's climate change or habitat change, they are moving into our state. And they love to grub up insects, and they do carry one disease, leprosy. So we want to stay away from them.
Excellent, thank you. Kevin, a Grand Island viewer, has a 35-year-old pin oak with small leaves. Tree is shedding them, and at the base of each leaf there is a spot that is white, shaped like a heart. Picture.
Yeah, a picture would be great. I have no idea.
Okay.
Never heard of that before. I know our pin oaks are notoriously bad for iron chlorosis, so that could be a part of the reason they're not healthy. But the heart-shaped white spot.
So that would be fabulous
Photo.
For a picture,
Yeah,
or
that'd be
that's
great.
in Grand Island. We'll let Elizabeth try to answer it. All right, Sarah, we have about a minute. This is a Thurston County viewer that has apple trees. They're saying the light frost didn't damage the blossoms, but they're wondering about the viability of the pollen. Good question.
it would have to get pretty cold for the pollen to be killed. If the flower, if the petals themselves are okay, then most likely the pollen is okay as well. But if you look really closely at the interior of the flower, if the stamens are brown, then possibly they would have died. So, but if the flower interior is the stamens are yellow, the way they normally should be, then I would say your flowers are fine.
All right, and it's been such a fabulous spring for long season of bloom for so many things
Sure
that
has.
potentially we'll have, you know, early season, late season apples overlapping flowering.
Sure.
Not much for pollinators, Jim, but I did
Not
see
yet.
one bumblebee.
Lots of queens that are flying around, establishing colonies, nests.
Well, I'd be happy if one did that in my backyard, but I don't think that's going to happen. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for Backyard Farmer. We do want to say thanks to our panel for another great show and to everybody who submitted questions and pictures. Helping us on the phones tonight, we had Master Gardeners Gladys Sturink, George Edgar, Kit Diamond, Melissa Hecker, and George Maley. From Finke Gardens was Luann Finke. Next time on Backyard Farmer, we'll be checking out a public gardening program in Omaha called City Sprouts. This project provides gardening space to local people and educational opportunities. We'll also see a composting project by one of our local dairies. So good night, good gardening, and we'll see you all next week right here on Backyard Farmer.